Thank you very much, Pierre. I'm flattered and delighted to be joining you for the second section of PM for the World, and I'll be with you for the next 5 hours. Goodness me, sounds like a long time. I'm going to start by inviting my namesake, Jonathan Arrighetti, to join me on the stage and just introduce us to CARE. So, Jonathan, welcome. You're the Humanitarian Planning and Communications Manager at CARE. And for the next 5 minutes or so, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. It's so good to be with you and other colleagues and Pierre and other project professionals around the world. As Jonathan mentioned, my name is Jonathan Arrighetti. I'm with an international organization called CARE. CARE was founded in 1945, actually, at the end of World War II, seeking to feed hungry people across Europe at the end of the conflict then. And since then, we have transformed ourselves into an international organization that works in over 110 countries around the world. CARE puts a unique focus on the needs that women and girls have in their daily lives, whether that's at work, at school, or even in moments of crisis, including the crisis that brings us to this conversation today, which is the earthquakes that started in February 6th in Turkey and in Syria. And with so much of your help and other project professionals around the world, CARE has been responding since the first moments of the earthquake almost 2 months ago. Now, we all know how difficult the context is in Turkey and Syria. We've seen the images on the television. We've heard the stories from colleagues that might be based in the region. But I wanted to share with you a little bit about what you have been able to do in partnership with CARE, in partnership with others, to really alleviate the suffering of people in the region and around the world. We can't tell you how grateful we are for this partnership as we're responding to the needs that exist. You know, we're talking about up to and increasing every day 411,000 people that you have helped us reach in our response with things like critical shelter needs, tents, helping people clean up the debris from their houses and apartments that might have been destroyed. Things like winter heaters. In the first couple days right after the earthquake, we saw freezing temperatures with snow and people needed heaters to stay warm. We're talking about things like food boxes and bread and cash to buy food supplies in local markets. We're talking about things like simple hygiene products. Many times when situations like this, people lose their soap, their shampoo, their toothbrushes, their toothpaste. People, when they lose their homes, they obviously lose their bathroom facilities. So setting up mobile toilets around the region. And also critical protection needs. People in moments of crisis are susceptible to incredible personal risks, particularly women and girls, as they might face different harassments or abuse in moments of vulnerability. So I just wanted to share those numbers a little bit, but also share with you some stories of resilience. I think one of the things that gives me hope is the incredible number of people around the world, project professionals, others from all over the world who have come together, who have stood with organizations like CARE and so many others in the region to really make a difference. So you have. I'm here to tell you, I'm just returning from the region. I was in Jordan and Turkey just about a week or so ago, working with our team and responding. Your well wishes, your thoughts, your funds are truly making a difference. We have a colleague, Laman, who I wanted to share with you a little bit about her. Laman was actually supposed to get married on February the 12th. And for those of you who can do the simple math, that was less than a week after the first of the earthquakes. I'm here to share with you that Laman did not have the big blowout wedding that was planned. But they did go to City Hall. They are married. But Laman is on the ground in the region, responding every single day to the needs of people, particularly in regions like Hatay and Islahiya. In the last week or so, in Shanli Orfa, because of the rains and the flooding that took place there. So you are making a difference, but the needs, unfortunately, are continuing to grow. An event like this is incredible because it's happening nearly 7 weeks after the earthquake. And many of you will have stopped seeing images of what's happening in Turkey and Syria. It's moved away from the news, but the needs are still there. I was talking with a colleague last week, and he was telling me that a person that he had met had just received the first thing that they had since the earthquake. So the needs are still there, but thank you for this opportunity to be with you today, and I look forward to answering your questions at the end of the panel. Thanks again, Jonathan.
Thanks ever so much, Jonathan. Yes, we'll bring Jonathan back onto the stage for the Q&A session at the end of the panel, so that you can ask him any specific questions that you would like to do. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to form up the panel. We'll be talking for about 80 minutes with questions, and hopefully with some good questions from you. So let me just get my panel together. And there we go. Right. So excellent. So welcome. We have Denise Johnson, Cedric Collin, Monique Wong, and Omar Zain, who are going to talk as our panel. And it'd be nice just to start off with to ask you just to introduce yourselves for a couple of minutes. So Denise, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Good morning for the North America, and good afternoon for Europe. And so I'm Denise Johnson. I'm COO of a company called Stratify. What we do is we provide transparent machine learning solutions for banks and financial institutions. And for credit risk, for fraud detection, and for removing bias in machine learning solutions. In simpler terms, what we do is we specifically work with lenders, banks, community banks, so that they can say yes to more borrowers. And these are usually underrepresented groups such as women, immigrants, I don't want to say minorities, but Blacks, Latino, different communities. And I am also a Turkish American, and I was in Istanbul during the earthquake.
Excellent. Thanks, Denise. Cedric, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, and thanks, Denise. So I'm Cedric Collin. I am Project Management Center of Excellence Lead in the pharmaceutical environment, and I am also an expert in portfolio program and discipline agile, value stream, etc. So more or less all the full panel, I will say. And so I'm really happy to be here, really feel involved also, because I really think that we can change a lot of things by this project and the full project approach, the wide project approach. Don't limit to a specific approach, but all the approach that will really help to anticipate, because more or less we are in a world where we need to be ready for this kind of future crisis, whatever. Here it's about earthquake, but in the past we have the COVID, we have plenty of things, tsunami, and we know with all those change on the climate, we need to be ready more and more to anticipate these things. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Cedric. Monique, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much. My name is Monique Wong, and I work for an education organization called Junior Achievement GA Europe. So we're a regional operating center that covers 40 plus countries. My special area is on supporting refugees and also on workforce development. So with PMIEF support, we are working in supporting Ukrainian refugees in the neighboring countries to help them with learning project management skills and facilitate them in getting the next job opportunity, whether it be entrepreneurship, so they become self-employed, or it could be an employment with any of the organizations. Really, really big pleasure to be here and share what the experience we have to get working with PMIEF and PMI chapters.
Thanks, Monique. And finally, Omar.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, I am Omar Zain. By profession, I am a project and program management. I've been in the field for over 20 years now. And the areas that I specialize in are the influence of culture on project and program management, be they international culture and multicultural projects, or be it corporate culture in big programs such as post-merger and acquisition integration. I am of Assyrian origin. I am British of Assyrian origin, and today I live in Italy. And here where I live, something that is relevant for what we're talking about today, here where I live, there is a project that I volunteer with that aims to help the immigrants that traverse the Balkan route come through Italy and try to cross the Alps into France on their way either to France or to Germany or to the UK. There is an initiative, a local initiative that tries to provide shelter, food, clothes for the mountains, advice, migration advice, legal advice, medical support and treatment for the immigrants who come through. And so yes, here I am. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Omar. Denise, I'm going to kick off the panel with you. You mentioned that you've had personal experience of the Turkish earthquake, and I thought that would be a very appropriate place to start. And I wanted to ask you whether you would share some of your experience of that and your reflections on project and program delivery in that context.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. I was, as a long-standing project manager, program manager in the fintech area, I was invited to speak for Istanbul Fintech Week, and so I was in Istanbul. My presentation was going to be on the 8th. I was spending some time with my family. On the 6th evening, the first earthquake hit, which was quite shallow, close, and devastated what we thought was a big area. We weren't aware that the next one was shortly following that even made even bigger damage. But what happened after that, because the devastation was so big and there was such need for organization, the community started organizing even before anything happened. So when we are living in the day of the social media, as the news of the earthquake hit, before any news channel, communities were learning about it. And in my neighborhood in Istanbul, that night there was a crisis center set up, something called Istanbul Volunteers, and they had started collecting what do you need first in case of an earthquake, for the ones that will come out, for the ones that are digging, and we started collecting things that night. And it wasn't just limited to my neighborhood, it was multiple places. So it was really, really informative to witness how quickly that civilian organizations have got together. Even before, and actually the first trucks started leaving that night to the location. That's an amazing work that the civilians have done. But when I reflect on it, and we were talking about it, what do you do when there's no road, there's no communication, there's no phones, nothing standing? Because about a few hours after that, the second earthquake hit. The area is so vast. Just in Turkey, the number is 54,000 people that are that have died, and there's the ones that are found. There's the ones that haven't been found. So the number is actually probably bigger. What do you do? I mean, there's the trauma. There's you're trying to help, and I think that was the biggest thing. The ability, from a project management perspective, from program management perspective, we're so used to planning. We plan. How can you plan when there's nothing left? And I think that was one of the big things. How do you organize when your entire infrastructure is gone? And those were probably the biggest components, when you think about it, and how many basic things that you have to think about. For example, one of the organizations that's happened, again, this is just organic. I am graduate of an American school in Istanbul, and there's a number of private schools that have language, very specific language education. And we were getting WhatsApp messages from alumni organizations saying that international teams are coming. They're landing in Istanbul. We need translators for, let's say, Spanish. We need translators for this language. So people were organizing in many different ways. I think the drive to help around the globe, and that's why we're here, is there. But the coordination, the complexity of the coordination is, especially when you have absolutely nothing left, that was very, very impactful. The other thing was the importance of social media. I'm going to say that again. When the earthquake hit, the way people were being found was not through any organized process, but it was they were actually on Twitter, telling their location and how many people are in the family that's with them at that point and that's alive. It's very bone chilling to actually be reviewing these, seeing these, but that was their only means of communication. And what happened is number of groups have organized to just send volunteers to those locations. Again, I witnessed the civilian organizations and volunteer organizations and the complexity of it. That's just when it happens. And then there's the coordination afterwards. And things do not end when the earthquake happens and you're trying to get the individuals. It's the next step is, okay, can you take care of the people that are actually survived? They are not under the rubble. And there was a lot of kids that were coming out, probably because small places, and a lot of survivors were kids. Who's taking care of them? What's being done? Because it was cold, it was raining, it was a very, and it still is. Now we have floods in that region, as Jonathan before mentioned. How are you taking care of them? It doesn't end there. And then there's the trauma that happens, and there is the next earthquake is expected to be in Turkey, in Istanbul. That's where my family is. So, for example, my mother now is wearing a whistle, small whistle as a necklace, because if something happens, how do you get heard if you survive? The trauma is entire nation. It's not just the people who are in that region. It's the entire country is living through this. And Omar might talk a little bit. We were chatting about this earlier. There is, waking up every morning to make sure that my family is alive. This is the new reality. This is the same thing when there's a war, when there is, the experiences do not end there. But from a project program management perspective, it's the trying to plan the unplannable, unpredictable, and the scale of complexity are where we need to focus on. And one of the thoughts that I was having is think of it as cells. This group knows this really well, this group knows this. Like having cells and having simulation exercises, because you're never going to be able to plan this. You just need to be able to adapt and be very flexible with what you got.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, that's tremendous, Denise, and I think clearly with a disaster like this, there's an immediate sense of what we need to do. You need to coordinate people around that, but people naturally, they understand the immediate need and they engage with that immediate need. And I think it'd be good to bring you in now, Omar, and talk a little bit about, Denise referred to it, about, once the immediate disaster recovery is over, what's your experience of the kind of ongoing management of the situation of the new reality? And I know you've been doing that with your work with the refugees. So can I ask you to share some of your experience in that context?
Oh, okay, sure. I'll give a background a little bit about the activity that I volunteer with here in Italy. It started in 2018 as a response to the migration crisis. As I say, here in Italy, in north of Italy, we get a lot of migrants who pass through the Balkan route and come through North Italy from the eastern part all the way to the west, where the Alps are, the borders with France, in order to continue their route, cross the Alps and go to France or to Germany or to the UK, depending where they might have family or believe that they have opportunities for a better life. Most of the people who come through that routes, not all, but let's just say a little bit over half are either from Afghanistan or Iran. But of course, recently we are having more and more people coming from different parts of the world, including from Syria, including North Africa and Central Africa itself. This is, of course, happening as a response to the different crises that we have been seeing around the world, not just in Afghanistan, not just the Arab Spring, but all over, due to safety, wars, crisis, economy, and it often takes people who take that route approximately a year, sometimes more than a year, if they have a family with them, to reach us, to reach where we are in that refuge by the Alps. So the activity got started in 2018 by an association called Talikakum. It is part of a local parish there by the Alps. And it's a refuge that can house 70 people inside it, and the organization manages it and provides 2 people full-time, always there to run the refuge and to provide food. And then there are many volunteers involved. The refuge is always full of volunteers. Like at any time you will find 10 or more taking turns. And they are involved in either providing clothes for the mountain crossing for the people who are coming by, most of which have never been on mountains, do not understand the dangers of the journey, do not understand what they are about to face. They don't live in an area like that. And we're talking the Alps, so these are dangerous mountains. And obviously they wouldn't go by the main road because they would want to avoid the borders. Otherwise they will be pushed back. They would not be allowed to cross. Some people are lawyers. Some of the volunteers are lawyers, and they provide legal advice as well. Some are activists who would accompany them to the buses on the initial part of the route. They take a bus closer to the border, and then they cross the Alps to make sure that they get to that point safely. And some would actually be there by the borders in case anybody get caught in the forest or in the mountains and pushed back, to make sure that they are treated humanely. So you've got and medical teams as well. This organization, as I say, started in 2018. I am sure there are many older ones than that one, and they started in reaction to the migration crisis. It took a while to happen, but then it took a while for the migrants to reach Italy. What I see as more difficult is how to handle this. Let's call this like the long-term effect of the crisis, migration after wars, for example. But how do you handle the long-term effect? Don't allow them, the downstream effect, don't allow them to get too big in the place where the crisis is happening. For example, in Turkey and Syria right now, people are rightly fully concentrated on the immediate effect of the crisis. But how do we put together an infrastructure or a process or a program for the long-term downstream effect that takes place? It's people without homes for a long term, malnutrition of children, no available education, trauma, children and family. How do we address that? It's a little bit easier here in Italy where I am, because we don't have the crisis itself here. We have the migration, so we have all the time to prepare for the long term. But in the place of the crisis itself, how do you do both? And I think that is one of the major challenges that needs to be addressed by the various communities. There is definitely no shortage of goodwill, and this is something that I have experienced since I started my work with the refuge. Just to give it a name, it's called Rifugio Massi in a town called Ulx. So if anybody is interested, you can Google Rifugio Massi and the town called Ulx, Oulx, and you will get all the info on it. So I've come to learn how much goodwill there is, how many volunteers there are. So there is no shortage of that, but the shortage is, or the needs are, funds and the ability to structure something very, very quickly when there is a crisis in the area where the crisis is. Because in other areas, you have time to put something together before the downstream reaches you, as we have done here in that particular program. But in the area itself, that is the challenge.
Excellent, fantastic. Thanks, Omar. I'm going to ask Monique and Cedric to comment on the two examples that we've got and the differences between them in project management terms. But I just wanted to mention, you talked about the kind of geography and the cultural issues associated with that. And I've recently been reading Christian Bason's book, Expand, Stretching the Future by Design. And one of his expansions is a geographical expansion. And he's arguing that in the future, we need to bring the world together so that things that appear to be the other side of the world, we feel much that we associate them as being with us rather than being with them. And equally culturally, we need to be more open to different cultures and an understanding of different cultures. I think that's fundamental. Good. So, Monique, let me start with you because Cedric's got his microphone off. Would you like to, by all means, share some of your thoughts in relation to the work you've been doing in Ukraine, but also your sense of some of these challenges from a project or program perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. I think one thing to keep in mind, and also just reiterating the other Jonathan's mention, is that in case of crisis, a lot of times children and also the vulnerable population in general, like whether that be the older age or just women, like those population are like disproportionately affected even worse. And so in the work that we do, we really try to equip these more of the displaced population in terms of how we can help them stand back on their feet and feel more ready for and build up their own community and their family. And part of the work that we do is just to really support them on the training or reskilling, because in terms of the relocation, because if any case where your hometown is disrupted, you might need to migrate and go to somewhere else. And in a new place that you need to establish yourself, you may not have the language or you may not have the right skill sets. Despite you being a doctor, you might not be able to work in a new location just because of illegal restrictions. So one thing that we try to work around is also understanding what might be the gaps, just to facilitate and understand the needs. So we work with the beneficiaries and where the community gathers. So what was Denise mentioning, how the local cells already are in place. We work with those to kind of understand what are the needs like, because you listen to them and you better understand how you can better address what is needed. So with the understanding locally on what the needs are, we build up on strategies where we will definitely include the locals. And with anyone who are migrants, we have the partnership where locals and migrants work together to collaborate on any projects, not only to build that community and support the resettlement, but also just to ensure that the way that we're building it is not far away from the reality. Like there need to be the feasibility and also the understanding to really fill up the need, because sometimes we might do things that may not really be addressing the core aspect of the issue. Maybe it's because like there's no childcare for the mother to work in an office, so maybe a remote and flexible arrangement needs to be made. So we really look into understanding the local needs generally, and it takes a long time for rebuilding. So like for the immediate needs, generally you have a bit more funding, but in the case of Turkey, compared to other crises, we actually have not seen as much funding going through, just in comparison from the observation. So I think having the immediate need, but also allocate some of the humanitarian aid for longer term rebuilding and for the resilience, I think that is also something that is important as we do part of the planning, as much as addressing the immediate needs.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Cedric, if I can come to you now, I think it's very interesting to hear this understanding of the immediate, and immediate being in terms of time and also geography, you know, when you're on the ground, and then the medium term, or the slightly further away, again, in geographical terms, in Omar's terms or in Monique's terms, you're not actually at the epicenter of the disaster, you're perhaps in another country. What are your thoughts about kind of managing these different states, and also, I guess, also the transition between the immediate and the medium term?
Yeah, so thank you, and absolutely to make the link. Really, what is really you need to learn in this kind of crisis is, okay, you have the people are volunteer really, and they are present for the immediate needs because they react based on the emotion. But where finally you need to help is mid-term, long-term needs that you need to address. And this is really the challenge. It is where with a program approach that it's more needed at this time, because the strategy is more or less that those people have a life that it's in all standard, I will say. So it will be not the same life that before, because you cannot withdraw what's happened, but to have the same similar things in place, city in place, infrastructure in place, access, work in place to work, place to interact, place to move, all those things. This is really mid-term, long-term action. And I really like on Monique, what Monique say is really the needs. What you need to identify on this program is really to work. What will create the value is to address the needs, not to come from all different countries to say, oh, I am in the immediate aspect with the journalist, I will draw that, I will support, I will send this just money, and I will do the event. I will do the event on Twitter, and after I disappear because there are another crisis and it's very far away. So it's absolutely not this. So really, all you can anticipate it is to really say in crisis management, we need to address needs that are immediate needs. And this we can count of people, but we need to coordinate at least. We cannot have all those thousands of people that come on the country in addition to on all those that suffering. So you need really to identify what really you need, the crisis management, and to have someone that allow people to come when you have more or less not infrastructure, but things for those people to do. And these immediate needs are more medical, but there's also food, just to have a place to live, just to not to be outside cold. Okay, you are in good health, but you are outside and you have anything and you are cold. And really take, in this case, the worst case situation. You have access to nothing, no more electricity, no more water, no more anything. Therefore, the midterm is really come with a second approach that, okay, what I can put in place to help them in between the long term, and the long term need to be reflected. Don't try to build too quickly things, because in case in the future the situation will be worse. So We need to learn, we need to anticipate. Is it maybe the right place to continue to live? Is it not maybe another place to continue to live? So this is a more long-term friction that you can have only by learning from precedent crisis. What I really like also in the different testimony, we cannot plan on those things too much in advance because the world is changing fast. The world is moving fast. Denise mentioned people are located based on their cell phone, on Twitter, based on other things, on WhatsApp group they can exchange. If you plan this 10 years ago, you are not discussing, you are not including this in your plan. When Omar mentioned about the way that people will cross again the Alps, what they need, etc., or the situation change every time. So you don't need to go to a further plan. You really need to stay at the needs identification, kind of business case creation, and to have some specific business case for some group and say, okay, what we need to know in this organization, who will take care on the immediate, the crisis management, who will take care on the midterm, and they start to work directly in parallel. They are not visible, but we don't care. They are working in the midterm, and who start directly to work on the long term. What we have in this kind of crisis, everybody wants to work on the short term and nobody take care about this other aspect. And this is the main mistake, including the government, etc. I remind when we have this, we were informed, I am based in Belgium, and people say, oh, we need to help. It's normal, a lot of people are impacted because in Belgium we are very multicultural. We have people from Syria, we have people from Turkey that live in Belgium, and so they are ready to help. And we have a kind of crisis support that is in place with the military, and they are just waiting. They are ready. 1 hour after the information, they are ready. And finally, they wait 3 days. And people complain a lot at the radio, why they are not taking the plane or moving. And those people explain, we are just waiting the authorization from the Turkish government to be allowed to come. We cannot come just like this. So don't forget that it's a country. Don't forget that we are coming with specific things that we can. So we cannot just come, sit. So they have tried to have a kind of organization where they are helping because they are not so immediate needs, but they are more in a midterm approach with the material they have, the knowledge they have, the doctor they have, the surgeon. It's really for long-term trauma assistance, etc., and this kind of construction. So it starts, but again, you see that the people are not ready to hear this. They like to have this kind of events. We are on Twitter, TikTok, 30 seconds, and okay, we make the event. So this is really, we need to move out. We need to reflect. We need to accept the criticism of those people, but say, okay, focus on this midterm, long term, and coordinate the crisis.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Cedric. I mean, dare I say it, I think it's a very different context, but I think a lot of projects and programs work in the same way. Once they're underway, there's an immediate knee-jerk response to issues that arise, risks that happen, when rather than anticipating and planning for the future. So there's a sort of, we're not very good at looking at the root cause. We just respond to the immediate, gosh, we've got a problem, solve the problem. And I think that happens in projects of all kinds. I think it's very interesting listening and thinking about the nature of disaster and the nature of particularly of the kind of immediate response where the emotional engagement involvement is such and there's a great sense of mission. Everybody has this sense of the big why. It's life-saving, and I think in it's interesting that in many other projects and programs in the more mundane world, that this sense of mission or vision can often get lost in what can be quite arcane projects, even infrastructure projects. And I wondered if any of you have any thoughts about how we might learn from these frightful experiences, but how might we learn from them in terms of engaging people, in terms of creating this sense of mission and vision for all kinds of projects and programs? Who wants to pick that up? Omar, please. Yeah, do.
Thank you, Jonathan. No, that's a really good point. we never associate missions and visions with projects and programs, and that sometimes make them appear cold, when we want to actually make people know that they are actually life-saving initiatives. But perhaps that is because they are means to an end and not the end in themselves. However, there is nothing against the means to an end borrowing the mission or the vision from the end itself. So perhaps it's a good idea, and that's actually quite a good point, that going forward, or whenever when people would do such projects in disaster situations, they would actually give it a mission, even though it's a project. I know from a classical management structure, this seems rather absurd, because a mission is a mission statement for a company, for example, or an organization or a group, and not a project, which is a transitory, just going from here to there. But where it is going to, it is where the group is going to. So why shouldn't it have that? And that would make it much more comprehensible to different entities, be it funding entities, be it organizations who would come and volunteer, being all those who would help and cooperate with us. So it is actually a good point.
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. Listening to you, I hadn't thought of this before, but I think that outcome focus is perhaps what's missing. There's a focus on the delivery vehicle, the project or the program, which, by its very nature, if it's a big project, can be rather complex and arcane, and something that most people will not understand and find difficult to engage with. But if you look at the output and the outcome, and think about, we're here, we're trying to transform people's lives, we're trying to save lives. Actually, that's something that people can understand and engage with. Yeah. And any other thoughts, Denise?
So I want to build upon what Omar said, and I'll take us away from crisis for a second. Anytime you can apply the emotion, the drive, the human element into the like, what is the impact that you're going to make by doing this project into the project key KPI, you're already getting everyone engaged more than you would because they're assigned to a project. In a commercial sense, so we are a mission-driven organization, mission-driven companies that has a very specific goal of financial inclusion. Everybody that we hire, everybody that works, knows that if you do this product, if you implement this client deliverable, you will have an impact to a community that wouldn't have access to financial services. And we actually are very serious about tracking this. And when you take that into the crisis mode, and I think one of the key things is, yes, you're planning, and I'm going to build upon what Cedric said. If you're planning for medium to long-term things, that's, you're not out there saving lives on that specific day when the crisis happened. But if you know that this planning here, which might look mundane, it's going to probably save about 40% of the people underground because you planned it, is a very big driver to do that project. You can actually get more engagement from that project. But being able to say, really tie, yes, I'm planning for getting some people when they arrive, if they arrive, from this location to that location. It is most boring. Well, that's going to allow them to save more lives. And it's going to impact, getting this little help is going to help a hospital being built later on down the road, like really tying that outcome.
Yeah, interesting. Cedric, yeah.
Yes, and really to jump on what Denise and Omar, and Denise just used a key term. She asked a good question. And really, this is important to really stick to a mission or a vision, whatever you're working in the crisis management, in private company, etc. To link really, it's something that all of us as project, program manager, portfolio manager, we need to remind to people. We need to communicate, but the communication mainly is to remind them how we do this, or to address this point, we have decided to do this. And so the good question to ask is the question back, to remind to those people why you are doing this, is to address this mission, is to address this how. So usually this how and why techniques, it's what we use in program management to be sure that we are still on track on the mission and the vision. But and it's everything. You can find it in program, in discipline agile. When we talk about value stream, we start with the customer, we finish with the customer. It's always the same things. Don't forget the work. Focus on those that are really at the heart of what we do, what we have decided to do. And so you need to have this in mind, that people do their best, but because they have some expertise, we are all different behaviors, different cultures, whatever at each stage of the project we are, of the program, we forgot this. We are too busy in our day to day. We are too busy in interaction, frustration, maybe conflict. And so just this is the key role to play, to say, okay, stop guys, stop to discuss, stop to conflict. How we will address this point, we have decided to do this. So why we are doing this today? It's because we address this. It's the strategy we have decided. We can always challenge, we can always change, but be still focused on this strategy and what we have decided. And with this, you open the mind of people. And this is important, especially with the cultural aspect. Explain to people why you are here, why you are doing this, why you are in this situation, why maybe you have 10 people that are focused on doing just food, and 10 that are just searching in their survey, people that are still alive. It's because you need to use the different resources, not only focus on everybody on the same things. 100 people with one cooking pot, you will not have food for everybody. But if 100 people try to prepare food or to have food, you can have maybe food for everybody. So it's because you are more mean to the why, and this is important.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I did a podcast recently with Mark Wild, ex-CEO of Crossrail, and he was making exactly this point, that you need to create a sense of mission in your project, and you need to sustain that. And I think what you're saying, Cedric, is so true. Ask those questions, and continue to ask those questions. You need to build that into your program, that you're asking those questions every week. Why are we doing this, and are we doing this the right way? Should we be doing something else? And bringing in diverse voices and others who can offer alternative perspectives and critical feedback, and maybe kind of shift you if you've got a bit stuck in a rut. So Monique, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I just want to add the point on building on all the different components that's been shared. I think there's always an interconnectedness between everything we do to the wider community. So as much as we might see us self doing just a small project task, like there is a ripple effect no matter what you think there will be. So maybe just in terms of planning, just think about like asking people why they want to be engaged in the project, because if you start from them, like say one person is really passionate about food, that's why they're facilitating the food management. That may be another way to kind of facilitate people's strengths and weaknesses. Well, not necessarily weaknesses, but like just the different strengths and passions in the different dynamics to kind of get it out in the open. So through the asking of why you're engaging and what drives you to do the project, maybe that could be reinforced through peers as well. And sometimes you might forget, because work can be overwhelming in terms of different projects you do, but maybe every now and then, as what Cedric was mentioning, pause and ask the question again, like, why are we doing this? What have we achieved so far? And just keeping the momentum up and feeling that mission and vision generally overall will help. And because like, say what Denise was saying, like if you have a community or the company is already having a mission driven approach, then people generally tie and work together towards the similar direction. So making sure that is always reiterated would be helpful.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I love that, Monique. And I think, thinking not just about why as an organization, why as a project organization are we delivering this, but why am I, what's in it for me, what's my motivation? And I think if you ask that question of yourself, then you're more likely to ask it of the people you're working with, which I think is really valuable. Yeah, good. I've got sorry, Omar, go on.
Yeah, just a thought that I want to share just came to me now from the wonderful contributions that just came in. It's the why. We spoke about the mission, but the vision, which has its own contribution here that looks into the future, is of extreme significance, because that would cover the downstream effect. The why, when we talk about the why, it should obviously include all the context of the disaster that we are facing, but should also include the temporal aspect of it as well, like into the future. How do we want people to have recovered from this disaster? And that is where your vision comes in. You're not just saying my mission for the moment, but my vision actually is to have people having recovered, children having received their education despite what have happened, have counseling have been provided to everyone who have been affected by the disaster, so they can continue with their lives without too much trauma, etc. Having a vision like that as well will allow, once we manage to sit down and plan, obviously the earthquake happens or the war happens immediately, nobody's planning, but immediately afterward, as we start to plan, if people would think about the vision in terms of long term and the mission in terms of context immediately, that would allow us to understand how significant are the downstream effects and give them the priority they deserve, especially where there is this tension of priority in the immediate terms. We have a disaster at hand. We're not going to think about the downstream effect? But when you think that the downstream effect, that the long-term effect could be children without education and trauma, then that's a whole generation coming up with extremely like significant and heavy and negative aspects that they will have to deal with. So really having that vision, not just the mission, but the vision, saying how do we want to have recovered in 5 years from here, will allow us to drill down, understand the different things that we need to handle, not just in the immediate context, but in the long term, and even prioritize them based on how much they weigh. Obviously, everybody's traumatized, but we want to prioritize children, for example. Adults can deal with it better, and that will immediately give us an idea of where to invest our effort and resources, and so on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take, Omar. I find that on big projects, even those organizations that do project ahead, they often do it through the lens of risk. So they do a kind of pre-mortem, and they think, right, let's think about what could possibly, imagine our project has failed, and we can think through the steps and the things that might have derailed the project. But I think thinking about the opportunities and thinking on the positive side, say, imagine that we've succeeded. What does that look like? What does that mean? Because I think that kind of storyline and that framing of the future is just as important in helping you understand your priorities and understanding the levers that you might use to kind of reach the outcomes that you would like to reach. Excellent. I've got a question here from Stuart Thorpe, who says, I'm interested in the views of the panel on lessons learned from the earthquake in Turkey and Syria that can help in the preparation for a future which will unfortunately see disasters, possibly on an even greater scale due to climate change. And that, I guess, that kind of connects with something that I wanted to ask you, which was really about how people working on projects of all kinds can look up from their project and think about the future, think about the positive side of the future, but also think about how we mitigate the impacts of human endeavor and human behavior. If you're working on High Speed 2 in the UK, or you're working on Sellafield or the nuclear program, how do you relate that to the future, to climate change, to some of the other things that are threatening to create human disasters of their own kind? Denise?
So I think one of the main things is education. Educating for the long term, to what Omar said. If you know how to, if you know how to, what to do in case of X, and fill in the blank, you know, there's going to be less, like that's a planning that could be done ahead of time. For example, going back to this situation, Turkey is an earthquake zone. Syria is an earthquake zone. So Greece is an earthquake zone. So there are preparation steps that always have to be there, and that's planning. That's the short-term planning. As Cedric said, there's a midterm and there's a long-term. But I think it starts with education. So that you're going to have less people, less victims if you have less fatalities if you have education. But the other thing I had mentioned early on is simulation. Being able to simulate what could happen if something happened. It's kind of like when we were playing with the blocks to determine the critical path back in the day. It's the same thing. What would happen if I move these different things around? Kind of like identifying that's a simulation exercise, the way we used to plan the critical path. Simulating, and the example I have for this is, if you have seen in Japan, the simulation centers they have, there's a center that has tsunami simulation. There's a earthquake simulation. There's a what would happen if your car is in the water, the pressure, and students, kids very early on go through this. Adults go through this. So in this sense, what would happen if this level of an earthquake happens in this location, or a bigger catastrophe? What are the things? And actually doing simulations will tell you where you have failed before, where you can get better, and put it into that simulation. I think, to Stuart's point, it is going to, unfortunately, we're going to have more disasters, especially with the climate change. We're seeing different, things happening, not just earthquake, and being able to simulate it, being able to plan for it ahead of time, so that if X happens, these are the 5 steps you're going to do, and you have the education, your community has the education, you have whatever, this is what the civil organization is going to do, this is what the government is going to do, this is what, when I'm asking for help from external parties, this is, they should expect X.
Yes.
This could all be planned.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Cedric.
Yes, and really to jump on what Denis said, in this kind of quizzes, we try sometimes to overcomplicate things. Keep it simple, because what are the main needs? The main need is coordination, and it's really what Denis mentioned in all what she said. So what you can plan is the coordination. For sure, whatever it's a tsunami, it's an earthquake, it's anything, any crisis, it's a war, you will have people without house, without any place to live, people with injuries, and people with no food. So coordinate at least who will take care, which group will take care about the food, we will take care about the injuries, the trauma, who will take care about just having a place to live and not to be in the middle of the rain or outside when it's cold, or because oh yes, it's a sunny place, but no, it's not acceptable. They are just on the ground. And the second part is really to plan on the lesson learned. Each time it's an opportunity to have lesson learned, to educate and include this lesson learned in the education, the design of the new building that we will do, the way we will prepare the population by the simulation Denise mentioned, the way maybe we will decide not maybe to create big city or this kind of site in this zone. For sure, we will not change. The sea will rise up. For sure, it will be more hot. So, or we can prevent this fire disaster, or we can stop, but make things simple and really sometimes just back to the basic, observe the others. Okay, we have many countries that live with 40 degrees each year during the summer. So why we cannot learn in terms of, no, we always like to have what kind of comfort zone, what we know, this kind of plan, and after we complain, oh, I need to use a lot of water. Okay, but just change, adapt the things that are really needs at this time. So keep it simple is important, and plan simple coordination for simple first needs. And in design is really, I like when Denise mentioned the education. The education part is learn with the design of the future things that you will design, learn about all those events. And so you have always learnings and include this on the design. And if you open your mind to change, to do things differently, to adapt to agility, it's just using the word agility, you will succeed with this.
Yes, fantastic. I think Denise, you used one of the other questions that's so powerful when you were talking. This question of what if. So use your imagination, and I think use it positively as well as negatively. I think education includes communication and how we frame things. I mean, clearly, because disaster is inevitable, there will be earthquakes. It doesn't mean that they're hopeless. And if we can communicate what we're able to do and share some of the stories or some of the success stories, so, the work that Omar's involved in and others, that creates a sense of hope as well as, rather than a sense of kind of hopelessness, which I think is in some societies can be rather can be a challenge, let's put it like that. I was interesting what you were saying about simulation as well, Denise, because back in the 1990s, some of the train operating companies in the UK, they put their train drivers through some psychometric tests which allowed them to understand how they would respond to a fatality. So if somebody jumped in front of their train, or if they would, and that kind of understanding how I'm feeling and how I'm responding, they showed actually had a huge impact on the train driving community, and people who then subsequently did witness or were involved in a fatal accident were psychologically much more resilient and able to return to work sooner. So I think this whole kind of idea of simulation, and I guess that comes both with kind of intellectually understanding the implications, but also having empathy, being able to empathize with the people involved, and you may not have their experience, and clearly I don't have the experience of the people in Turkey, but I can empathize with what's happening to them. I think that's very critical. Good. I'd encourage people who are listening to please throw your questions at us. We'll continue talking, but it would be nice to hear from anybody who's kind of listening. Okay. We've kind of tackled Stuart's question. So that was great. Yes. I wanted to kind of come back to this idea of how big projects and programs can help transform the world and transform the world for the better. I mean, it's a personal kind of view of mine that, when governments particularly are investing in huge projects and programs, infrastructure particularly, these things are designed not just to deliver infrastructure, but to change our world for the future and to create a better world for the future. And I'd welcome your thoughts about how we should perhaps be adapting our approach to projects and programs, to big projects and programs, to kind of make sure that bigger picture value, that benefit of future generations is perhaps reflected in the business case and in the way these things are delivered. Monique?
I think, just building on what Denise was saying, I think education is a good key point. And I think the other component is exposure, because I think the more you are aware of what may or may not happen and be equipped with the skills to know how to respond in the most effective manner. So starting young and having them be learning about different components of what different impacts and effects has from big projects, like, you know, just the way you walk on the road, how you can make it just more friendly. I think those are already things that when you have a diverse group of people who have been exposed to different understanding of how the world works, then they are able to kind of add that component into the project planning as you are engaged in it. So, I mean, for us, we are teaching like young people how to do project plans, and how they need to learn is they need to actually do a task. Like they need to actually go through the whole cycle of creating a product into the market. And so like you're actually applying what you learn, and so that everything is internalized. So when you, in the case of a crisis, like it just becomes a second nature that your automatic response is already there, not to be like, oh, what do I need to do? What are the resources I need to do? So it's already very ingrained and becomes like a second nature. So when we have everyone that aware and sensible about how we can do things in a better way with climate change in mind, how we tell young people how they can do things in a circular economy, with circular economy in mind, like, and all that component, I think that will already help with our planning. So maybe also engage younger people in all of your planning of projects, because they might have a voice that may not always be heard, but might be needed in the panel.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, Cedric, yeah.
Yes, things also when you talk about these big projects, etc. In some environment, I will use one that I know very well, pharmaceutical environment. In fact, when we have big project to create a manufacturing site, we plan not just to create the manufacturing site and the purpose of this site. We plan also the destruction of this site, because we know by learning that the rules change, the really the way to be really aligned with the standard that increase each year, each decade, all the things. So we need to adapt. We need to bring. We know that technology change. So in fact, you anticipate the construction 10 years in general, 20, 30 years of use, and 10 years of destruction, because you will not destroy like this, coming and remove. No, in this destruction. And so more and more we plan with the sustainability of the things. So the design include you have some sites that are created like this, some big site, manufacturing site, where you have a part that is in construction, you have a part that is really in use, and a part that is ready to receive when we need to change. So inside the same site, we destroy and we work the new site, and now we reuse the place where we destroy. And so the design of the things that are similar have been performed, things like electricity, water, used water, or we will capture it, because this more or less you are not destroying. And so in the full design, the most complex things was not really to build all those sites and to play with this kind of big Lego game, I will say, like a kid, is the design of the ground, of the zone. And this needs to be taken into account if you translate it to after a war, after a crisis, after an event like an eclair. It's also, okay, we have this zone with this constraint, with this, spend more time to the design. And sometimes politics like to jump to have, but we are all like this. We like to push people to jump in execution and not take time in design to include all those things. So agile practices in discipline agile, like starting with a rolling wave, you give the bone to the dog. You start to say, okay, you can start to work on this, because at least you have visibility, and use this time really to think about long-term things, about full design of things, and include those aspects. So we really need to change our mind, not to plan for an immediate effect. When we say, okay, we have built this new infrastructure and we have a life duration of 50 years. Guys, 50 years is nothing. Almost
Yes.
majority of people, they will be present at the construction, but they will be present when it will be outdated. So guys, it's not acceptable 50 years. I'd like that you have a plan for the 100 years, for 200 years, for the next generation, because 200 years, more or less is 2 or 3 generations now. It's not
Yes.
like in the past. So this is a
Yes.
mindset change.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you know, we're not just talking about managing the complete project life cycle. We're also talking about design for the circular economy, and those two things are equally important. I'm going to pitch Michelle's question to you in a moment, which is, I think you've got it there on the screen, which is a really great question. But I was going to invite Jonathan Arrighetti back into the stream and encourage any members of the audience who would like to throw questions at Jonathan. But while we're waiting for them to do that, shall we tackle Michelle's question? So I think I can. There we go. So. Monique, you talked about bringing young people's voices into play, and Michelle's talking about the individual and the voice of the individual, and the skills and the mindset and the capabilities of the individual, and how do we leverage that in project terms? And any thoughts?
I think people need to be aware, like especially for vulnerable people, like you generally don't feel like they're ready to put their voice up generally because they feel like, oh, we are like not in the right position to kind of share. But I think the more encouragement and the confidence that we can offer these people to kind of voice out what they need really will enable us to build a better project and program that really addresses the overall impact that we want to see generally. And maybe we have expertise in like, projects, but how we can address it to make sure that it's tailored for the local community. Definitely we need the local voices and encouraging to voice out and really give them that safe space to kind of be able to communicate to you, like to us when we're doing it, what is needed, because sometimes when you have experienced trauma, especially, it may not be so easy to voice out what you need because you just need some time to process it. And there might be a lot of worry and and aspects that you don't know you need to deal with in that situation. So giving them space and time to really sit in their emotions and also be able to voice out is also a component that we have observed in our work, just needing a little bit more time and patience to kind of facilitate the need, other than the immediate of like, if they're in a cold situation, they need their shelter, but more on the longer term, like, oh, are your children wanting to stay beyond the location or whatnot? And in terms of like volunteers' individual skills, I think like with us and in the forefront of the volunteering, in the work with like the beneficiaries, like understanding what they need, and then we can definitely share those information with specific volunteers to kind of be able to match what are the skill sets that could really facilitate the support in that way. So there's twofold, I think. Like one is from the beneficiaries that we want to engage with, as well as understanding and having that openness from the individual volunteers as well.
Excellent. Good. Anybody else? Oh, Jonathan, yeah, you joined us.
Let Omar go, and then I'll jump in after Omar.
Okay.
All right, thank you. No, just a thought. As any management consultant knows, the smaller the organization, the more multitasking or different role hats that people wear. The bigger the organization, the better defined the roles and responsibilities. The smaller one, the more agile the organization is, organizational agility, which is a good thing, which I find to be a very good thing, actually. It's very flexible. You find that people undertake multiple roles. Purchasing does a bit of engineering and might even work directly on the shop floor to understand the components and so on. People do multitasks. Somehow this is the kind of attitude I think that Michelle is asking, how can we have it in projects and programs? How can we have, and it's a form of organizational agility, not just planning agility, agile organization. Just my own thoughts, Michelle, is just like actively in these kind of projects and programs, given that they are not your typical, there is planning, of course, but they're not your typical planning details, deliver the product. You're working in the midst of a big situation, probably chaotic and changing continuously. So maybe one of the first steps is to understand the different skills that people have and ask them how they can contribute, given that the nature here is in big part volunteering and in big part, helping. So rather than just asking them, come in and this is your role, project management, you do this, actually engage people, make sure that they are aware of the full scenario that we have, our vision and mission, if we have them formally or informally, and ask them how they can contribute and see how we can create an agile organization that can be flexible enough to adapt as the situation changes, which it will.
Yes. Cedric, any thoughts before I go to Jonathan? I mean, I know big programs have a habit, 100-year programs have a habit of turning into god awful bureaucracies given half a chance. So how do we sustain that agility, and how do we make sure that we're listening to individuals and their particular skills and capabilities?
Skills that I coach and I mentor a lot of big complex project and program, and so I learn to them with the agility and to let people to express their agility. Stop to overplan in detail. So what in the past people are so proud. Oh, I have an MSP project with 10,000 line. Okay, great. But finally, do we need this 10,000 line? No. Let people, they know, they are expert, trust people. They know what to do. You don't need to explain hour by hour, day by day what they need to do. You need to explain what is expected for them and what you measure finally is some key milestone. And after we have all those sort of complex tools that we put in place. And at the end, no, I have big complex project and program that are for investment around 500 millions of euro on complex manufacturing side. And more or less the program is 200, 300 lines. And so this is good because you trust more group of people. You let them, okay, this point you address. I like that you address this point in those boundaries, in those constraints, is those really key information that I want, and I will interact with you. I will create a trust relationship. I will not monitor too deeply, but I will really monitor what does it mean, what is the impact, and I trust you. And when you create this trust, people can start to express themselves, they bring with agility, they come, they organize. Okay, whatever they are performing 98% today, and tomorrow it will be 110. I don't care. I care about the full aspect of this task. So not over planning, not too deep dive, not too detail, really to see at this time, especially with this helicopter view, what is really important. Link to the how, the why we are doing this. Because if you are too deep dive, too specialized, you lose the momentum, you lose the mission, you lose the vision, you lose what you are doing. I'm just doing it. So this is the beauty of project. You can work like this. Sometimes you cannot act like this in operation. So use this beauty and this advantage of project and not try to recreate operation in all projects.
Yes, yeah, excellent. That's fantastic, Cedric. Jonathan.
Great. Thanks so much, Jonathan. And I'm actually seeing a different question come in from Stuart directly
Directly at you. So feel free to respond to that.
I know we're coming to time too, so I might answer the question and just provide some closing thoughts from me as well, if that's okay, Jonathan.
By all means, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, again, I wanted to thank all of you for your commitment. I think CARE through your investments and in sort of answering a number of the questions that have come through. CARE was in the region before the earthquakes. We were there throughout the earthquakes and the aftershocks, and we'll continue to be there long into the future as the needs are still there. I think about our own planning process as we're thinking about just the earthquake response, not even specific to the general context about the Syrian civil war and the massive displacement going on in the region. We're thinking about this in sort of a 3-year time frame. So the generosity that you and your members have given to this effort are going to be used both in the immediate term, have been used already, but also will be used for a number of years following the earthquakes. Stay involved with us. Please visit our websites. We are an international confederation with offices all over the world. For those in Europe, in Western Africa, I would encourage you to go to care-international.org. That's our international website. For those that are interested in donating, care.org/earthquakes. But stay involved. Go to our websites, look at our social media, raise your voice with people that make decisions in your communities about working with crisis-affected people around the world. Listen to the stories. We continue to tell stories of individuals who are affected by these crises and overcome immense challenges. And we can only continue to do this work with your partnership. So just again, thank you from all of us on behalf of the CARE Turkey and CARE Syria teams, on behalf of the over 411,000 people that we've been able to support thus far together. And thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me into this space, and to PMI for organizing this event.
Thanks ever so much, Jonathan. We've just got sort of 5 minutes left in our panel. I think you've done a great job, the four of you, and Jonathan coming in there. So perhaps we just got a moment for a final reflection from each of you. Let me start at the back of the list, as it were, for once. So Omar, I'll kick off with you.
Thank you. Well, my general reflection is that there is a lot of goodwill. There is a lot of people who want to volunteer. There is no lacking of that, and it is what we need is to provide the infrastructure, the organization, the coordination in order to put it together when there is a crisis. And of course, the funding. There is never enough funding. There's always lots of people who want to help, but not enough funding to put things together. I am optimistic, really I am. Like, since I started working on this project here, I realized how much goodwill there is, and there's a lot of optimism from that point of view. And I agree also that we need to concentrate on adapting and adapt. But I would just give a word of warning. We adapt to the effect, not to the cause. So yes, we need to adapt. For example, we have the environmental crisis. Let's use that as the example. We have to adapt to the changes that this is doing in our areas. We have to adapt and survive. But adaptation comes at a price, financial and further environmental impact, and also at the well-being of life. It does come at a price. And we do need to be optimistic and adapt, but we need to remain realistic and recognize that the cause is still there. That by adapting, we have not resolved the situation. We still need to address it. So yes, please, let us be optimistic, but let us not be unrealistic. Let's not confuse being realistic with being pessimistic, which can sometimes be a line that some people don't recognize. No, be optimistic, but be realistic. So adapt, but never forget that there is a cause that needs to be addressed. And unless we address the cause, we will keep on adapting, and at some point we'll crack. You can only adapt so much. So that's the reflection.
Thank you, Omar. So Monique, 60 seconds from you.
Sure, thank you. I think the key important thing from my end is really, like, education is a really good tool from a preventative measure as well as a responsive measure, and starting them young with better exposure and understanding what is to expect in the future gives them more of a resilience, really, because they feel like they're more ready to cope with what is to come and really adapt as needed. So I think really strengthening their muscles in terms of being able to adapt and react, and also project management skills is something to also inspire for the young people, because they learn how to react and do better.
Fantastic. Thanks, Monique. Cedric.
So I will use simple words. Be pragmatic, be realistic, be pragmatic. Helps people in those crisis situations. Does that mean to help them to support in a temporary solution, but really to help them in a long-term solution, and include those people also in the help. And don't think the box because you have just treat their injuries, put them in temporary building and say, okay, we have helped them. No, those people want a real life. Consider them as human if you consider them that they have access again to a kind of normal life. And with this, you can do great things.
Thank you ever so much. And Denise.
After such great wisdom, there's not much I can say, but I will repeat something I said. I believe that education and simulation will allow us to actually form the bonds, looking at the out, to Cedric's point, being pragmatic, looking at the out, mission. Why are we doing this? What's the outcome? To unite people, to engage people even more while you're doing this, a very long-term project of helping them now, helping them midpoint, and helping them in the long term. And I think that project managers and program managers are excellently suited for this way of planning more than any other profession because we think this way. So that's, I'm very hopeful that this team is going to create great crisis and have created great crisis managers.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, and thank you to all 5 of you. I think that was a fantastic panel. I really enjoyed it. I found myself, I'd forgotten we got an audience, and I was having a conversation with you, which I think is a good sign. So I think bang on time. We're maybe 5 seconds ahead of schedule, which is always a good thing in project management terms. So thank you all. We're going to take a break now, and then I can ask everybody to reconvene here in 10 minutes time, and we'll have Melina Delano as our first speaker. So thank you once again.